Today we will look at the commanders of March of the Machines and look at which ones are the most interesting, which ones bring the most new things, and you can kind of see a few of them already here. Some are great, some are strong but don't really deliver something new. So for example, you have Alice Norn, which is a very strong card. She protects you at first for just 4 mana. This is very, very efficient. And then she makes a lot of tokens with which you can later attack with double strike. She is a sort of, well, commander for wide strategies, which is interesting. But this strategy has already been proven, and there are better ways to do it, to do the strategy. So that is why she doesn't really add anything new as a commander. Of course, cool card still, but as a commander I wouldn't say this adds a lot. One card that does add a lot to me is Rona, Herald of Invasion. And I would say weird, but the most interesting new commander that we have gotten. Why? She works very well with legendary spells, and there are some that already do this, but she does this in a new way, because every time you cast one, you may untap Rona, and I feel this is very refreshing, because it is about drawing and getting new things, but it is also about looting, discarding your cards, so you will want to have some recursion and stuff like that. So that really adds a lot to me. So and this is not even everything that is there, because there will be more. Of course, the lore here is that Rona will be there before an invasion, and whenever any of the new Praetors or other legendaries enter the battlefield, she gets to do her heralding again. But there is also a second side, which makes her the Dimir, of course, because this activation also counts towards her mana identity. So she is 2 colors actually, and 2 good colors, I think, for looting and well, recursion. And then her other side is the Tolarian Obliterator, where she is obliterating the Tolarian professors and students maybe, which says she is a 5/5 for 1, for just 5 mana and 2 life, not too bad, with trample, and whenever a source deals damage to Rona, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random, which is a downside there, but then you may play it or cast it for free. And that is really interesting, because that sends us some ways. But let's talk about the first part first. So, of course, you will want to play a lot of small legendaries. Doesn't really matter maybe too much which ones they are, as long as they are 1 or 2 mana, you might want to play them in this deck, just because they can be looters. Then, of course, you will want some legendaries that also help you whenever you draw cards. So Shielded is a good example. You want this one, a really good legendary enchantment for 1, but helps you draw extra cards as well. Or Alandra, which helps you make blue drakes, and when you draw your 5th card, which isn't impossible, she and the drakes you control, so you probably have a bunch, get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Well, if that is at least 5, that will be already very impressive. But then about the second part, so let's remember, we need to deal damage to Rona to get big cards out of her hand. Means that we might want more tapping creatures, which makes it very interesting, because the front part of Rona also wants to be untapped a lot. So untapping and stuff like that is very interesting in this deck. But these, what are they called, Timmies? These guys that deal 1 damage and then have to tap, they are great for Rona, because they can deal that 1 damage to her. You can do this 4 times in your turn and get 4 cards out of your own hand. which is interesting. I haven't found many ways to do this for your opponent, but if you can do that, that would be fun too, of course. But then you can have some big spells in your deck as well, that synergize, of course, with the rest. That can be your finishers, which you can get out for free. So I thought this was a really interesting new way, a card that combines multiple strategies into one, that helps you cast all the big guys that you otherwise wouldn't be able to cast. Then we have Glissa, not Rona again, who is a new commander that does the new theme for the set, which is incubation. Of course, we saw before that Alice Norn did this too, but I think Glissa is just a bit better and has better colors for this. So what does she do? She incubates twice at the beginning of your combat on your turn. When you are doing that, you are probably not too happy. What you want to do, I think, with Glissa is you pay 5 mana, you play her, and then at the beginning of your combat, you transform all the incubators that you have put down on the battlefield from earlier turns and get a bunch of big artifact creatures, which is also important, to strike in and battle your opponent. Otherwise, if you already have a bunch on the battlefield and all of your, for example, all of your incubators have been transformed already, you can give them and all of your other fractions, like Glissa, first strike and death touch, meaning that they can very easily get in and kill a bunch of creatures. So we are planning to do that. It is combat centric, but it does it in a new way, so that is cool to me. What do we want? We want, of course, incubation tokens. Glissa is very strong with that, of course, so if you find any cards that are strong and have incubation on them, that will fit very nicely. We want, because Glissa works with +1 counters, or incubator tokens do, we might want stuff like Winding Constructor or things that double your tokens or anything like that. To double the tokens, and Winding Constructor isn't too expensive because it is in those colors instead of only green. Then we have a bunch of tokens, probably. We'll want to make a lot of tokens here. And anything that works with that helps them add mana, for example with Jaheira, really helps. And then there is, of course, we want to double a bunch of creatures' power, but we can use any fraction to use as creatures with Death Touch and First Strike, so that we can get in with them. So any fractions, I feel like this is the best lord for the fractions that we've gotten as well. And last but not least, definitely not, Glissa can make a bunch of artifacts, and cards around her want to do that. So things that work with artifacts, we'd like those too. With Phyrexian Scriptures, for example, we could make Glissa an artifact as well. Or is she already? No. So we can make her an artifact as well and destroy all non-artifact creatures. Then we can get in there very easily. And by the way, I just thought about this, but any other board wipe actually works very well with the incubator tokens, because you destroy everything, put down Glissa, and only then turn all of your incubator tokens into actual fractions that can attack right then. I feel like she's very good with all the good board wipes that Black has. So interesting commander, and I feel like the best fraction one actually that we have gotten. Then we have Errant and Giada, and I feel like they have two very definite ways to go into. They can help you look at the top of your library, which is, I guess, something that might help you too. And then you may cast spells with flash or flying from the top of your library. And I feel like you want to do one of both. I feel like Errant and Giada aren't the best commander for flying creatures. Might be fun if you're a fan of it. But I feel like they're actually pretty neat for a flash deck. Because they have some fun interactions with other cards. So I went into that direction for giving them this spot in the top 6. So, of course, you will want a lot of flash creatures. And what a lot of flash creatures do is protect each other. So that is interesting, because, for example, if you give one hexproof, you can help the other creatures survive, and you will have a bunch of small creatures on the battlefield, I guess. There are some that can become pretty large, but it isn't really what flash creatures do. They aren't sufficiently costed, I guess, but they are all about surprising your opponent, which is, of course, a strong suit of flash already. But when it comes from the top of your library, well, you might not even know what will happen next. Then we have, for example, Guardian of Faith, which is a very strong version of this, which says, when it ends the battlefield, any number of other creatures you control face out. This can make a really nice surprise effect that can help you survive a board wipe and then win the next turn. So there are some ways to win for us, but they might be a bit expensive because they are already good. Flash is a strong effect, and well, yeah. But for example, Mocking Doppelganger might be a bit more your budget. If you don't want to go too far, of course, I maybe wouldn't. There are a bunch of cards that enter the battlefield as a copy of any other creature or any other creature from your opponents. And you can at least be just as strong as your opponents at flash speed, which is, I guess, stronger already. And then there are some cards that work, because of call time mostly, with cards that you haven't cast from your hand. Like Vega the Watcher, which helps you draw a card whenever you cast one of those cards from the top of your library, for example. Which is probably the only example. And Vega has flying, so you can flash. Or you can't flash him in, but you can't play him from... You can play him from the top of your library, which is, I think, fun. And there are some strong flash effects as well, that when you have a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, you can strengthen all of your creatures, or you can help them get in to your opponents, which I find to be not sufficient yet, so the plan needs some shaving, but I feel like there's some nuggets here for a flash deck, which is indeed relatively new. Then there is Omnath, and Omnath has always been a very strong card, and this 5-color completed version isn't very different from that. So what it says, if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. So you keep the mana whenever it would, well, I guess, move away. I feel like this is already a strong effect on a card that basically only costs you 4 mana and then 2 life. Which I think is a very strong effect as well, because I think this is the only 5-color commander that does this. That only costs 4. So, oh no, that's actually... No, yeah, it might be true. But I'm not sure at this moment. But then at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, which I think is almost most interesting, look at the top card of your library, you may reveal it and then basically put it into your hand. But if it had 3 or more colored mana symbols, you may reveal it and then add 3 mana in any combination of its colors to your pool and put it into your hand. Of course, that mana can stay around and stuff, but I feel like it is interesting that Omnath can be a 3-color commander or more, 3 or more color commander. And there are some fun 3-color things that we can do here. For example, Ruinous Ultimatum becomes way more easy to cast when you have revealed it from the top of your library. Of course, your opponents will know that it is coming, but if you do this on the same turn, I feel like this can be a very big blowout. So this would, instead of having to have 3 white mana, 2 black and 2 red, you get 2 white, 1 red and 1 black, which is way easier. Definitely, seeing as you have already have at least the white and the red. So Omnath really helps you cast these cards very well. We want things like Muldrotha, which can help you cast cards from your graveyard again. A lot of value. I feel like this will be a big, flashy deck with, of course, a bunch of ramp, but still mostly with just big stuff that you can cast because Omnath helps you ramp so fast. From just 4 mana, which is very good. And multicolored cards are already strong because they have that extra cost. But for example, when you reveal Rian, Angel of Rebirth, from the top of your library, she becomes only 2 generic mana for you to cast. That is very strong. So if you find these cards that are like Modrotha, which is just 3 generic mana when Omnath is done with them, this becomes very strong. Note that the trigger happens on the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, so you can play things, but you can't do it in your second one, because then all the mana that you had would be black. But I guess minor downside, the first main phase when you want to play most things that are big and flashy creatures, at least. So whenever another multicolored creature you control dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. There is already a lot of support for multicolor, and I think the fact that Omnath is 5 colors makes him a very good commander for that. And one, this isn't 3 colors, so that doesn't really fit with the theme in that way, but it does say, Meeting of the 5 does say, exile the top 10 cards of your library. You may cast spells with exactly 3 colors from among them this turn. If you have a deck with cards with only exactly 3 colors, this is a very fun card, I feel like, to play in this deck. Definitely as you get all that mana as well, that you can later transform. I don't know whether when this leaves the mana leaves and you get it back as black mana, whether you can use that actually. But that is a cool ruling to look after. I feel like it's different. You don't lose it though, so it's the same mana. If you would lose unspent mana, then mana yeah, it's the same mana. If I look at the rules like that, I feel like you still can only use them to cast, so you would need to use this mana right away. It's my personal judgment, but I'll ask around. But fun deck and very strong cards that you can use here, and really interesting, and has some weird interactions, which I also love to find out how they work. Then we have Quintorius, but I have already made a video about him, so I'll just link that up there. There. I feel like this is the most fun commander of them all, but he doesn't really add too much new things, but I still want to mention him. That's why this isn't the top 5, which works better. But I feel like he does something new. I feel like he's my favorite new Boros commander over Feather, which was my previous one, because it was also very unique. But Quintorius does a new thing for Lorehold or Boros, whatever you want to call it, by having you cast cards that you exile with him for free when you sacrifice spirits. So that restriction really makes it extra fun for me. And yeah, I love how he has to keep his spirits around to make himself stronger. But again, watch the EDH deck for him. I feel like I explained it way too in depth for another round of deck with Quintorius. And then last, and I guess least in this top 6, but still a good good choice, is Yargle and Multani. Weird choice, you might say. This might be a meme, but it really isn't. Because this commander is 6 mana. That is a lot. I prefer ones that are at max 5. But of course, you are in a ramp color, so not too far from happening. And Yargle and Multani can really quickly help you end the game with just a few cards, or at least end someone's game. So there are a bunch of things, mostly in green, that care about a lot of power. So there are ways to draw cards, so 18 cards when you play Risk Cards Expertise for one, or to ramp 18 times with Traverse the Outlands, which this version also is a very thematic one with the tree guy. I feel like the giant is a bit less thematic. But of course, what we want to do is jam in and maybe give it +3/+0 in some way. And then trample or anything else that helps you get in for damage, because you only need 21 damage with this guy as your commander. So I feel like he's a very cool Voltron commander. So there are other ways. in Golgari in which you can do this. Jared helps you for 3 mana, sacrifice the creature, so you will have to sacrifice your commander. And each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Now, this is that damage from Gerard, so that is a bit less, but it deals it to each opponent, which I like a lot. If you can deal 21 damage to each opponent, that is still a big blow. Plus, Jared, of course, can be returned. If you are in a dedicated ramp deck, that is very doable for you. Another fun thing which you can now do in black is giving your creature flying and lifelink, not too bad there. Mask of Gristlebrand even helps you pay a bunch of life. Okay, that is dangerous. But then you draw that many cards, so 18 cards, not bad. I would pay 18 life for that, definitely. So that is a strong thing that you can also do with Yargle and Multani, which makes them less of a blowout when they get removed as well. But very dangerous because they have now have flying. And of course, there are a bunch of equipments that already do this, so there is more of an array of options that you can choose from. But it is, in any case, very funny to imagine these guys having wings and flying in for hopefully 21 damage and otherwise 18, not too bad. But that was it. That was my top 6. I did it in order of the first one was the best to me. But didn't really care too much about which one was actually it. I feel like they really add some new things to Commander and might change up some decks for many people. For me, it already did because I built Quintorius already. I'm addicted just like you. Okay, but let me know what your favorite Commander is. Might do some more deck decks on them. And have a nice day.